case you haven't noticed, we live in a new world. Things have changed. The internet has changed everything. Relationships have changed, and how we educate also is changing. Typically, what would happen if someone wants to be involved in ministry, they'd need what's called a Master of Divinity degree. It's an entrance degree. It costs about $65,000 to $75,000 to get that degree. After coming out of college with maybe $150,000 worth of debt, to slap another $60,000, $70,000 on top of that means you come out of seminary with $200,000 worth of debt. And if you can get a job, it usually pays less than a school teacher and without the healthcare benefits. Who can do that? And so what's happening is when people go to seminary, they're trying to go as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, online if that's necessary, and then actually get their training in the church. It's a bad way to train shepherds. So after 10 years of seeing this, we have been looking for a better way to train the shepherds, one that gives them experience, and we have found it. Charlotte Wake, as of last week, is now partnering with the Robert E. Cooley Theological Seminary, which was founded here in the Carolinas, just over the border in South Carolina. It's a combination of online and face-to-face training. And what makes Cooley, one of the things that makes Cooley such a great alternative is a typical MDiv degree costs $11,300. That's a big difference. And in fact, some of the shepherds don't actually even need an MDiv degree unless they're actually trying to get a church job. But if they're shepherds who have sheep, they may need basic training in three things: Bible, theology, and historical theology. Bible, what did God say? Theology, what does it mean? Historical theology, how did we get into this mess? And everything else is sort of an add-on to those basic things. We have a partnership now with Cooley Seminary that we can train shepherds and give them certificates for those basics. Now, if they want to go on for a master's degree in divinity or even a doctorate, they can roll those courses over into those programs. But for Charlotte Awake, what we need is shepherds who know the Bible, theology, historical theology, and who are very well trained. Now, how does that happen? Well, here's another advantage of our partnership with Cooley Seminary. When a student comes into Cooley Seminary, unlike a typical American seminary or college, they're given three things, three mentors. They're given an academic mentor. That's the one that makes sure they're competent in their classes, in their learning, in their paper writing, in their theology, their Bible, and historical theology. They're given a ministry mentor who helps them in ministry and do ministry. And they're given a spiritual mentor to make sure they don't tube out. Now, from Charlotte Awake's perspective, we want to make sure they get that academic training. So the partnership with Cooley makes sense. But we offer the mentorship in ministry and the spiritual formation. From day one, if a Cooley Seminary student wants to go on our track, on our program, then we teach them to plant these clustered church plants from day one. Now that means, unlike a typical seminary student, the ones on our track have to be vetted in a very different way. We have to make sure that they are shepherds. And so those students, we take and teach them and work with them to plant clusters from day one. Clusters are groups of people who come together and engage the Bible in community, but who grow together in community. And as they grow, they come to recognize that they are congregations, and the spiritual gifts function for the building up of the body. And biblical leadership begins to emerge. That's how you know they become congregations. But until then, they're clusters meeting. And from day one, we teach them how to start these clusters, how to multiply these clusters, and how to grow. So if a typical seminary student is working, part-time at seminary and full-time in a job, it may take 3 or 4 years, sometimes 5, to get adequate training. But they're in ministry the whole time because we've got them in ministry. We walk side by side with them, face to face with them, and train them in ministry while they're getting the academic. By the time they get out of seminary, it's possible a typical shepherd could be overseeing 4, 5, or even 6 clusters. That's 80 to 120 adults. And that is a congregation. Oh, unless, of course, you want to do this full time, in which case it's the beginning of a congregation and you have to keep growing in order to start paying salaries. But if you take bivocational shepherds, which is what we look for, then by the time they get out of their training, which they never really do, but by the time they get their certificates or their degrees, they're already in ministry because Charlotte Awake has walked them through the process. But then there's the spiritual formation part. Just having a spiritual advisor is not enough. It often doesn't work. It's like, well, you account to me. How's your spiritual life going? Great. Did you lie? Well, probably. So instead, Charlotte Awake uses the concept of journey groups, where we put shepherds together face to face in these small groups where they grow together, they grow up together, they face the woundings of life together, so that they have these bonds and bands with other people who are shepherds. And that doesn't stop when they get their degree. Those groups continue throughout the shepherd's life. And so does the input from Charlotte Awake in how to multiply. Let me simplify the whole thing. We've got this partnership now with Cooley Seminary, which solves the academic problem and gives training in Bible, theology, and historical theology. But because it is a competency-based seminary, they also get an academic advisor, a ministry advisor, and a spiritual advisor. And Charlotte Awake fills those last two positions. It's a great partnership, and we're looking forward to see how the Lord is going to do it. Now, over the next months, we are going to run a pilot with Cooley Seminary. We're going to be targeting the Charlotte area. If you know somebody who's interested in this, please send them our way. And from Charlotte Awake's point of view, we're looking for 12 shepherds in the Charlotte area that we can begin this kind of training. Now, Cooley is looking for 1,000 students. And this is a pilot for how to make them aware of the uniqueness of what Cooley has to offer. But of those larger bodies, Charlotte Awake is just looking for a handful of shepherds that we can prove out the next concept. What is the long-term benefit of this? It will allow this decentralized networks that thrive in the face of growing spiritual darkness and persecution, and you know it's coming. And it will give them us the ability to help start these all over the nation, from city to city to city. So if we have students that are in Philadelphia, for example, the very first thing we do is we find other students in Philadelphia, bring them together in these shepherd groups, these journey groups, and we mentor them in ministry while they are taking classes online through Cooley Seminary. It's online, offline, but they never have to drive to a campus. They remain employed, they're bivocational, they enter ministry that when they're with us, they grow in ministry as they grow up. And in that way, we're able to multiply this ministry across the country. I'm excited about it, and I haven't said much about this to most of you because I couldn't make it public until after the board meeting of Cooley Seminary last week. So as of last Friday, the partnership was formed, and in fact, we're not sort of an appendage program for them. We actually now have a seat on their board of directors, and that allows us to continue. So I'm excited about it, and I'll write more about it. But there's one more thing I want to do before I finish this particular email. It's another video. It's to let you know how we're doing personally.